I want to welcome you back to the Grief Support online group this evening, which is a free support group for anyone at the moment going through some form of grief, some form of loss. And if that has occurred in your life, I want you to know that this is a safe space where you can find support. You might be the person who needs to listen to others and hear that other people are feeling the way you feel. You might be the person who needs to verbalize how you feel and to express the sadness, the difficulties, the difficult questions, even those things that just help you to make this load a bit lighter. And if that is you, then I just want to welcome you to the page. Remember that we don't record our sessions and that this recording that you are watching now is there just to encourage you and make you more familiar about what is happening in this group. When we do experience loss in our life and we find ourselves in a stage of grief, whether early on or later on, questions come up. We sometimes even question ourselves, and we find it difficult to navigate these waters of grief, and we think to ourselves, but are the feelings that we feel normal? Is the intensity of our grief and our sadness normal? Why does the person who works with me and who lost his wife last year seem to be coping better than I am after having lost my dad more or less in the same period, 2 months later than he lost his wife to cancer? My dad died in an accident. Why does it seem as if he's got his emotions under control and he's able to carry on with his life, and I feel as if I'm swamped by a very dark cloud? Shouldn't it be the same for him than for me? Why are my children responding in a different way than the rest of the family? These are normal questions. One of the things I would just want to highlight tonight and just talk about is that we need to allow ourselves to experience our own unique set of feelings in the stages and the phases of grief recovery that are unique to us, to the way that we live, our mindset, our health, the way our body responds to grief. There isn't a recipe. There is a sense of relief that you can get from knowing that you don't have to judge yourself and question yourself about how you are experiencing your grief. Also, perhaps help you to give someone else a bit more room in how they are either expressing or not expressing the grief they are experiencing. Grief and grieving is your personal experience of loss. And there is, as I said, no recipe for that. What about those times when we do feel completely overwhelmed? It could come out of the blue. It could be sudden. Something could happen at work, or we could be watching a program on TV at home, or even just helping kids with homework. And there could be something that triggers our emotions. Well, when we are overwhelmed, we are overwhelmed. I always say that the person we are grieving, if it is a death of a loved one, if it is a personal loss, having lost a loved one, then you must just remind yourself that this person who has passed on was so valuable to you and to many others. This is a unique person whose life could never be duplicated by anyone else, a person who walked a unique road, someone who was so valuable and has now passed on is worthy of being grieved. Every human being is worthy of being grieved because we are valuable. So if I'm overwhelmed by sudden emotions or intense sadness or even a feeling of despair, and I don't feel that I have the room to show that, but now it's just happened, I can also just say to myself, you know, what I'm expressing right now, even though it's just come over me without my feeling that I'm in control, I now feel out of control, then I can just say to myself, this is how I feel because the person I'm grieving was so close to me. And I can express what I feel and my sadness because it is an expression of how deeply that person has made an imprint on my life, and that imprint has been left, and the person is no longer there. This is a painful reality, and no one should be judged for expressing such sadness. Our self-esteem could suffer. We could feel condemned. We could feel that we need to make a resolution about something. We need to make a major change in our life about something. We could perhaps be reflecting on the life of the person who had died, and if they had perhaps not had a healthy lifestyle, we can make a strong resolution about learning from their mistake and deciding that now that you've seen what it has done to them, that you will change your lifestyle. But the very next day, you could feel differently about it or not feel that it's so important anymore. This is also normal. It is better in times of deep emotionality not to make important major changes in life. Rather write it down. Make a note in your journal. Say, this is how I feel today, and I believe that I must make this important decision. And then let it lie and reflect on it later when your emotions are more balanced and you can more logically and objectively look back at that. Maybe it is something that you need to proceed with. Because we can also be faced with loss in other ways, such as losing a limb, losing our job, and either as a result of COVID-19 or for other reasons, losing our home, or through a divorce, perhaps losing our family. There are different types of grief that can visit our lives. It is just as important to understand that there's a grieving period. There are different grieving phases. Whatever brings loss into our life, we should remind ourselves to take it easy, get support, and be kind to ourselves. Because it is possible for us to enter a state of complex grief. When more than one event happens, a consequence of an event causes another form of loss. It could end up placing us in a position of complex grief. It could end up becoming a complex grief. When we are dealing with complex grief, we really need support. And I just want to highlight a few of the physical symptoms that you could be experiencing, or you could see someone else that you want to support or your family member and notice that they are experiencing some of these physical symptoms. A change in appetite, an overall lack of energy, an apathy that could set in, being irritable, highly irritable sometimes. People feel charged up inside and they are trying to keep a calm composure for the sake of everyone around them, and also trying to hold on to emotions and not letting your mind race through all of the reality that you're going through, perhaps when you're with people, but then when you're alone, that's when you want to let go. That's when you want to go into that beautiful space in your mind where you have the memories, the good memories. Sometimes you have to work through those really painful memories. For instance, having gone through an accident, having gone through a long period of trauma, or having gone through a terminal illness with someone, and then eventually that person dies, and you have to sift through those memories and also get back to a place where the good memories are that you've built together. Feelings of hopelessness can also lead to feelings of despair. When you do get to that point of despair, or see that someone is actually not recovering and not recovering their hope, it is so important to just be supportive. There is a fog, like a cloud of emotion that settles on us, sometimes in phases of grief. And we call it a fog because your brain becomes foggy, your memory becomes foggy, your perception of reality can become foggy, because your whole body, mind, and spirit is bogged down by the loss that you are experiencing. This is the reality. If you're looking at a child and they're trying to cope with school and not being social, if they were very social, not being interested in doing things with you, taking a walk with the dog, playing ball, just remember that there's that fog that also comes and settles on them. And sometimes they don't have the words to describe how they feel. They just try to move through this dark time, trying to figure out how to deal with it. Not really dealing with anything, but just being. Being sad is a state of being, and it's what we go through. And better to embrace it than to try and push it away, because eventually it eases up. Eventually there is progress if we are patient with ourselves, if we are kind to ourselves. If you find yourself having a really pessimistic outlook on life, it's because at that time, hope is not your focus. There's a time where we don't focus on tomorrow and on everything that's going to be good again. We're in that emotional state, we're in that phase of grief, and we need to accept that we are there and be willing to work through it so that we can eventually get to a place of hope. Ambivalence, one day you feel fine, the next day you don't. One morning you feel terrible, you don't feel as if you can cope with this day. And all the responsibilities that start the moment your eyes open. But by the afternoon, you feel steady. That evening, it's a different story again. So there's the ambivalence. And that's when we find it difficult to keep to a healthy meal plan and a healthy exercise routine. And our lifestyle shows that we are not going through a normal phase of life. And it's important just to watch out for ourselves then, so that we still practice self-care, even if we cut down on our routine, not to give up completely on healthy eating and healthy exercise. Even if it just means taking a walk through your garden, it's better than not getting out at all. Grief is not something that we can just acknowledge, process, and there it goes. And it takes time. It takes time. In my short book that I've written and uploaded for you as a free tool to use in your own grief journey, you will notice that I talk about loss as a personal experience, and that death is a concept until it becomes personal. Until it becomes personal, and then we know exactly what it means. And it's an awful reality. It's not something that's easily worked through. We can even feel numb. There are times when you will feel a numbness emotionally, and it could also feature as a physical symptom. As we work through the magnitude of our loss, slowly but surely we come to terms with the reality. In coming to terms with the reality, there are also responsibilities that we have to look after. Sometimes the effect of having lost a loved one means a change of routine, or having to move house, which is an extremely traumatic event to go through if you are dealing with the loss of a spouse, for instance. Having to move or having to go and help family members, for instance, pack up personal belongings is a difficult task. It's one of the processes we go through to work through grief, and we can choose how to approach that. It's never easy, but in that painful process, it helps to make a choice to say, everything that I'm going to do today with you to help you is going to be difficult, but let's share the good memories. If you think of something, tell me. If I think of something, I'm going to tell you. Let's cry together. Let's laugh about the good memories. It helps us to come to terms. It really helps us. And it doesn't make the grieving easier. It just helps us to work through the grieving by being very realistic about how we feel and how sad we are. Grief can also become scary. It's important for us to remember that when we really feel scared and alone and abandoned sometimes, that not to panic. Pick up the phone and phone somebody, send a WhatsApp, send a voice note, get a virtual call going. Maybe you don't want your video on, but at least you are speaking to someone. Find someone to talk to, find a counselor, you can talk to me, you can contact me, you can be online with us. Just remember there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you when you feel as if you cannot at some point deal with the intensity of your grief. Grieving is a difficult place to be in. We can all survive it and we can grow through it. Remember that we all make mistakes. Some big, some small, but there are mistakes in our lives. When you experience a feeling of guilt, just remember that you also are human. And just as you can find it in your heart to forgive others, you can also forgive yourself. And you can rest assured that other people will also be able to forgive you. Especially after a terminal illness, we can feel guilty because we feel we should have done more, could have done more. But it's a time to let go. It's a time to say, I have done what I can do. I have done my best. The person I love has passed on, and I am now in a phase of grieving, of self-care, of resting, of recovering, so that I can also again be useful to others in future. This is our session for tonight, and I hope that it's really been helpful for you. Good night, and thank you for joining me, and be with you again in 2 weeks from now.